Hello. I want to talk about something that I have noticed for a while, something that's been on my mind, something that I've talked about with friends before. And that something is Oracle decks. And the fact that they don't get the same attention as tarot decks. And it's more than a feeling I have as well. I see it in my sales, I see it in my YouTube analytics, I see it on my Instagram analytics, and just the general commentary across the community that I stumble upon through videos and comments. So, I want to pose this simple question to everyone. Why aren't Oracle decks as popular as tarot decks? And most importantly, what are we actually missing when we overlook Oracle decks? So, in this video today, I am going to walk through a few Oracle decks and discuss the ways that I use Oracle decks in my practice, types of Oracle decks, different types of uses, different practicalities for them, anything that works for me or sometimes doesn't work for me, and maybe things that will interest you and that you can apply to your practice. So, to kick us off, I am going to walk us through the vertical oracle because I was kindly asked to do a flip through of this deck, and I realized that is missing on YouTube. And for anyone that's looking for this vintage deck, it's always nice to see the artwork first. So let's dive right in to the discussion and into a bunch of Oracle decks. For Oracle decks, I can understand in the past that perhaps there wasn't a lot of selection to pick from, and the selection that was available maybe wasn't your cup of tea. Maybe it was too love and light, fluff and stuff, guardian angels, way too long of affirmations. I can totally understand that. But I am not talking about back in the day. I'm talking about current day. And in current day, we have so many options for Oracle decks. I will admit, I struggle to bring in as many Oracle decks that I do as tarot decks. Tarot decks are far more popular, like I said at the beginning. My question is it because Oracle decks feature their own system and so it takes time or there's a barrier to entry to start working with the deck versus a tarot deck, you know the system and you can start whipping cards out and reading? For me, I think Oracle decks bring such a beautiful layer to tarot decks. I think they expand upon the tarot meanings. I think they bring an opportunity to go deeper into the tarot meanings. I think they offer a beautiful guidance in your readings. And I do know there are downfalls to Oracle decks. So I'm not naive in the fact of some Oracle decks just don't work. Maybe one works for me, but that one doesn't work for you. I have plenty of Oracle decks in my collection that I would not use for a single card pull, for example. But those decks that perhaps I wouldn't use as a daily pull card, I would absolutely use in a bigger tarot spread with the Oracle. I think the beauty of Oracle decks is the open system, is the imagination and the creativity that an Oracle deck can bring to your reading. It invites you into deeper thought. It invites you to push further into the tarot archetype. And it's just really cool artwork. I mean, I'm like, why wouldn't you want to bring in more fabulous artwork to your reading and to enjoy and look at? What I really love about this Oracle deck here, the vertical Oracle, is the use of keywords. The keywords are neutral, so it's not all fluff and stuff. There are some harsher keywords in here, but there's a lot of neutral keywords. And when you have that flexibility in the keywords, you can really take that where you want. Now, is that part of the problem? Like I mentioned, that openness, that less rigid format, that open ended question, the never ending path. Is it just too overwhelming to bring in? Is the structure of tarot something comfortable to work and read within? These are all aspects I'm really interested in, I'm curious about, and I have no beef with it one way or the other. If you love Oracle decks, fabulous. If you don't, I'm just genuinely curious why. Does it muddy the waters for you? Are there too many crossing connections and paths, too much noise coming at you. I can certainly understand all of those reasonings. But at the end of the day, my question still stands. Like, why not bring it in though? What is the problem? I think it's also hard to find an Oracle deck that really clicks with you. It is definitely a lot more of a difficult thing than with tarots, let's say. Like I mentioned, the amount of tarot decks to Oracle decks I have is rather staggering. I try out a lot of Oracle decks, and many of them don't stick. When we get into more examples in this video, hopefully some of my categorization of Oracle decks and ways to use them will spark something for you and see them in a new light. Because I just love the additional layer of Oracle decks. I like that some Oracle decks have phrases, some have titles, some have keywords, some even have poetry. But it's the intent of it, is it not? So I don't know. I just really wanted to pose this question to everyone. I split these up to look at the horizontals. And I will say in this deck, there are a good amount of horizontal cards, landscape cards. So it doesn't feel like there's only a random one or two out of this stack. So I'm going to put these to the side and let's look at them this way. I just feel like Oracle decks get a bad rap because of the back in the day decks. But even this one is from the late 80s and it's so awesome. It's fabulous. The collage is awesome. If you have seen my great grandmother's Faded Frontier Oracle and the Wasted Authority card, you would think I would have seen this artwork prior to making it. But let's talk about the collective, two separate artworks, totally unrelated, of everything can come so close in execution. It's pretty wild. This deck is super cool. Definitely do not spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this. I got this for $100. I would say that is probably the top end of what you should spend on this deck. Of course, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I am definitely not for policing of anyone's activities or interests. Do you? This is all my opinion, of course. But this is definitely a wonderful deck to bring in. I cannot wait to work with it this year. You may have seen it in my December wrap up. It's just super, super cool. Off my tangent of loving this new deck. So, besides that, is there a problem with Oracle cards connecting the artwork to the keyword or the title? Do you get stumped when you see an image and a word and to try to connect that and then to also connect that with tarot cards in a bigger spread, for example? I think a way that helps me look at artwork and the title or the keyword is to really think outside the box. Being super literal can be challenging when you're looking at artwork or something in a creative space. And I would say Oracle decks and tarot decks are something that live in a creative space. But you have to take a thread of something. And here we can see the word illusion, the parting skies with a large cherry in the front. Well, what do you associate with cherries? What do you associate with a big blue open sky? And how does that fit into illusion? What sort of analogies come to mind? With a cherry, you could think of something sweet, something tart, could even think something young, and then apply that to what an open sky could mean. Endless possibilities, and then pair that with illusion. Where does that take you? So breaking down an oracle card does require a bit more work than working within a set system like tarot. So I completely understand, but I really want to encourage everyone watching this video to lean into oracle decks in your practice. Really quick, since this is the last card in the deck, I quickly want to talk about the guidebook like super briefly since there's not a video on this. So if you're curious about this deck, it has the guidebook. How hilarious is that? Perfect. I totally did not plan that. So in the guidebook, you get a short subtitle and then you get the astrology placement. And then you get a really nice write-up that speaks to the artwork tied into the meaning. Some of them hit and some of them don't for me. I haven't read the whole thing, but I will say it's good to reference and to at least check out a few times to decide if it's right for you. Now that we've looked through this flip through and you've heard some of my thoughts and musings, let's take a look at some categories of Oracle decks that I've pulled out and ways that I like to use them. So, three different styles of Oracle decks I've pulled out here from my collection. We have the title style, which I categorize as the keyword is the title of what you're seeing. So, it will usually say the animal, the object, the feeling, the emotion. It is stating what this is, literally. The middle style here, I would call more of a poetic or conceptual style. The text on the cards is neither keyword or title, it is a short phrase. And then we have a keyword that is describing what you're seeing. You could think of this as like a title of the artwork, it's hinting at the concept of the visual. All three styles have a place in my reading styles. So, for example, something like this Hollow Valley deck of symbols with the literal title on the card, I find best when working in a tarot spread with one oracle card and then multiple tarot cards. This gives me a nice opportunity to reference the guidebook for the Oracle deck to then weave into my tarot reading. I find this type of deck to be more challenging for a single card pull, especially if you are not familiar with the symbols or the imagery or what the title is expressing. This can feel frustrating with that aspect. And with this very title like deck, I find this style of Oracle deck to work really well in a deck study, and not in the traditional sense of studying a deck, but say it's a topic like plants that you really want to learn more about plants, but you still want to incorporate your tarot practice. So, using an Oracle deck that has a very specific theme and a very clear title that you then could reference the guidebook or look up online or other reference material books that you have, and then you could learn more about what that card you pulled. So, I love doing that for multiple decks that I have. So, I find that to be very helpful for this style. For the Long Way Home Oracle, I love this poetic, very artistic language of the phrases that are used here and paired with the visuals. These types of decks work really well for me as a single card pull, but also in a tarot spread. They add a very artsy layer to a tarot spread. They add that emotional, poetic depth to a tarot reading. And I feel like that is something that's lacking in a lot of other decks. So if that's something that intrigues you, I say definitely look into decks that lean into that. Feel like it could be a beautiful prompt for creative writing or artwork as well. It really is an open ended thing. And for someone who loves to use their imagination, and I work creatively, everything I do is a creative job. I like being able to figure it out myself. So something like this really speaks to me and it fits multiple purposes. Now, with Oracle decks that use a descriptive single keyword, what I find works best is that it's not literally describing what you're seeing, but it adds to what you're seeing. It adds to the imagery, it adds to the action, it adds to the emotion. Sometimes these types work really well for a single card pull for me. Sometimes they don't. It's one of those sort of hits and misses, but these always work beautifully for me in a tarot spread. And once again, don't feel like you need to lay out as many oracle cards that you do tarot cards. I find just laying out one, maybe two oracle cards in my tarot spread is more than enough. I like to use them as the focal point or the anchor point in my spread. I really like it the oracle deck to do the leading in the tarot reading, if that's the style of reading I'm going for. Of course, it all depends on the mood and the day, but it just adds a beautiful foundation to the tarot, and one that you can be creative with. Once again, you're not stuck in this rut of a system. It's open ended. I've said that a few times now, but I think that's kind of the blessing and the curse of oracle decks, is that they're systemless. Of course, creators do make their own systems, but it requires more of a lift from the reader. And I think sometimes that turns people off. So, next, let's look at a couple of decks that work really well for journaling or for getting more out of the card without necessarily needing to reference a guidebook. So, we will check those out next. So, how about two oracle decks here that have a set of phrases or questions? We have the Iris Oracle here, and we have the Prairie Majesty Oracle on the right. Now, the cool thing about looking at these together is that the Iris definitely has a bit of an attitude in comparison to the Prairie Majesty. The Prairie Oracle has some really beautiful questions that would work awesome as journal prompts. And the Iris has a lot of phrases. I think there are some questions on some of them that also would work really well for a journaling exercise, or, like I showed in the previous set, would add a poetic or artistic emotional layer to a tarot reading. I think both of these would work really well as single card pulls. Iris, there might not be enough to go off of if you aren't familiar with the phrase and the imagery, but the Prairie Majesty, with those questions, I think you could use that as something to ask yourself for that single card pull. I think these are both two examples of a little bit of hard and soft. While I don't think either go super any way, like I said, the Iris definitely has a bit more of an edge than the Prairie, but they're really great examples of oracles with multiple uses and a personality. These will definitely lead you somewhere. I know a lot of people like the Iris for inner child work. It definitely has that vibe. If you love nature and more question prompts, the Prairie would be perfect. It definitely leans into a positive neutral side. It's really beautiful artwork to look at for both of them. And I do find myself using these two decks on their own. When I do use them in a spread, it's one card. I usually pull one card from the Prairie and probably 3 tarot for the Iris. Depending on the first oracle I pull from the Iris, I might pull a second and then 2 tarot cards. Once again, this is all so dependent on like mood and day, but I just want to show that there's different styles, different angles, different uses that these oracle decks can live and breathe and be used. So, everything I said could be fine and dandy for you so far, but you still just don't click with oracle cards. Have you tried to pursue oracle cards that fit into your interests or genre or hobbies or whatever? For me, that would be nature and animal decks. You can always figure that I will give a nature or animal leaning deck a try because that's what I'm drawn to. That's where my interests and practices lie. So I want the cards to reflect that because that's where my headspace is at. That's where my perspective sits. So if you're using a theme of an oracle deck that doesn't fit your perspective or your interests or the narrative, it's probably not going to click for you. So these are two examples for me that are nature-based oracle decks. We have the Nature Speak Oracle and we have the Secrets of the Mystic Grove Oracle. Two very different visual decks. How funny that we just flipped to abundance on both of these. Two different styles, two different approaches, but both fit the theme of nature. Once again, having an oracle deck that maybe has a main keyword and a few more underneath could be that extra push of prompts that you may find helpful to use in a tarot spread with one oracle deck. This one does something similar, but we have the titles of the photographs that you're seeing, plus a couple of keywords that represent the symbolism of those areas. Both would work great for a single card pull and in a tarot spread. Single card pulls for me are dependent on the deck. I don't normally pull with tarot cards. I will if it's a certain practice or I'm doing some sort of study. But for the general single card pull for the day, I definitely like to pull from oracle decks. I also like to use oracle cards for my altar. I have a space at my computer at my desk for an oracle card, and I pull that daily and have that next to me at the computer since that's where I spend a lot of my time during the day. I also have a place on my altar for a weekly oracle card, and both of those spots will use two different decks. And then I have an additional space on my altar that features a spot for 3 cards, 2 to 3 cards. And that is my monthly space for animal gnosis practice. And I usually lay out 3 cards for the animal of the month there. So I may have about 5 decks out on display every month of oracle cards. And that practice works for me. I love what the oracle cards bring for me. And each spot, I have a different purpose and perspective of what I want represented there. Not all decks work in these areas for me, they have different purposes. The single oracle card at my desk, I find tricky to fulfill because I need that one to be quick hitting, but still deep. So, right now, a deck I am using there, I'm not loving. It's falling flat for me. So, I know that that deck isn't a single card pull deck for me. However, I know I love it within a tarot spread because I've used it plenty in a tarot spread. So, this is just something you have to practice as well and find what works for you. And I'm not saying that oracle decks must work for you. I am just gently encouraging some oracle deck love that I think it gets a little shafted, is all. Is all I'm saying. So these two definitely fit my interests. So next, because I just talked about single card pulls a little bit in there, let's look at 2 decks that I really do enjoy for that sort of thing. These 2 oracle decks, we have the medicine cards just for today, and we have the Forest Fae cards here. I find really helpful for those quick hitting single card pulls. They have a message on there already. They are rather feel good because I'm not necessarily trying to work on something when I am doing a single card pull. I just want like a feel good message, something to think about, something to consider for my day or my week, and move on. So the medicine cards do just that for me. I will just crack open the tuck box, pull a card, read it, and stick it back in and move on. It is just feel good. I love this deck. And for the Forest Fae, I find that it works both ways in a tarot spread, just as a clarifier, especially when I'm doing a larger tarot spread. I might pull 1 or 2 of these out as a clarifier. But in the same way, I can just pick 1 card out of the deck for the medicine cards. I can do this too, crack open the box, crack the deck, see what cards on bottom, top, whatever, get the message and move on. It's not necessarily one that I am setting up in a card holder and keeping on display, although that works as well. But these I just really like for the messages. Like they just feel good. And sometimes that's all we need. And I think that once again, that's probably, some of that oracle dislike is because it's so feel good. It may feel void of any depth It may feel too toxic positivity, whatever you want to frame it as. I do understand, but once again, I just feel like Oracle decks have gone past that. And if one is that, there's other options out there that aren't. So I just feel like this is like a nice in between of like old school, new school, meets my interests, and are mini and cute. I mean, there's something to be said about a mini deck, right? So that was just a really quick example of these. Oh, can we just look at this really quick though? Aren't these just adorable? I wish this was still in print. I wish it was super easy to find. I scored this on an absolute steal of a deal. I don't even want to say because you'll just lose your mind. I just love it. I don't have the full size one, and I don't necessarily even want the full size deck. I've always wanted this one, and it just meets everything I love. The backs. Also, can we talk about these backs? How cute are those as well? How about Oracle decks that don't have visuals? They just have words. We have the Common Oracle, we have the Guidance cards, and we have the Woven Whispers. Now, what makes this great is the flexibility that words on a card can bring. This could work great as a single card pull, if that's the sort of aim you're looking for. Maybe you're looking for a word of the day to follow you through the day, a word of the week, a word of the month, a word of the year, whatever. Something like this would be great in that type of practice. These type of Oracle decks are also really great at making spreads. Lay them down and lay your tarot cards underneath and see what you come up with. They're also just really great amongst tarot cards in a spread, or even as clarifying cards. These type of Oracle decks have endless uses. They are super flexible, and I feel like everyone needs at least one of these in their toolkit. It really is what you can come up with. Now, the thing that's cool about these is that even though they're just words, they still create a mini world. So even if you are someone who's super visual, words can create a visual world in your mind. With Levi's Woven Whispers Oracle deck here, which is now available on Make Playing Cards. So if this tickles your fancy, definitely head over there to check it out. You can feel this fae world that he has built just through words. In my Common Oracle, you can feel this very land-based, rural, folk world that I have built that embraces the neutralities of living that lifestyle, as well as the harsh realities and truths of that. And then the guidance cards here are first really fun because they have these pops of color and different fonts used. So that is bringing in a whole personality in itself. But then it's giving the words a feeling, an emotion, a vibe as well. If you're curious how I work with these in particular, especially the guidance cards here, in my video, A Practice in Pairings, I do example readings with tarot and oracle cards together. If you just want an in-practice example of how my brain works and how my reading style can maneuver. So I'm a big fan of these. I just think they are workhorse decks. Endless possibilities, and you don't even have to be bothered about artwork as well. Okay, last but not least, to wrap this video up, let's look at the last group of decks here. So I'm categorizing these as wildcard oracles, creative cards, whatever you want to call them, but they are more open-ended visual cards. On the left here, we have the cards of chaos. In the center, we have the Lydia Jacob story cards. And on the right, we have the Weird Science deck of curious cards. So what I find fascinating about this style of deck is that it's completely open-ended. I mean, this is up for your interpretation 100%. The cards of chaos do have titles on most of them, so you could use that to pull in what you may with the visuals. Same with the Weird Science deck. There are phrases that go a little poetic, a little creative, a bit artsy, and they're just a really fun layer to throw in as, like I said, a wild card. The Lydia Jacobs story cards have no keywords, but lots of fun visuals that I find fascinating to add in as not necessarily a clarifying card, but something to just add an extra layer to. So that is kind of how you can interpret that as you may. But I like that challenge sometimes. I like that sort of use of my creative brain power. I will say they do take more work to bring in. These aren't quick hitting, fast hits. The cards of chaos, you would definitely benefit from being rich in symbolism knowledge. I mean, I think you could probably say that about any deck you work with, but I think this one specifically would get you further. You really have to work at this and search some stuff up if you want to go deep. The Weird Science deck I find really fun to include as an actual 1 to 3 cards in a spread. Because it does have longer phrases to it, it does lend itself to being a bit more low barrier to entry to use. But you can see they're all visually super fun, really artsy. You could definitely get something from this for sure, especially if you're someone who loves to go to the museum, who loves to go to art galleries, you like to look at artwork, interpret artwork. This would be pretty streamlined for you to start to include. Like I said, it does require a bit more effort. So it might be an inclusion for me in readings when I want to slow down in my reading. I want something to feel more visually full, visually fulfilling, and to spark my imagination. These also would be really cool as writing or art prompt, especially the Lydia Jacobs story cards. I could see laying those out and creating a visual narrative. And that's something I didn't mention about the previous set of decks with the mini words, that you could lay those out and make a small phrase, make a short story, and come up with a reading that way as well. So these are almost the opposite of that, like come up with a visual story just using these cards versus the word decks in the previous group, laying those out and coming up with a story with the words. And I think that's just something you have to decide what works for you. Maybe that's not a style you enjoy, and that's fine. But there's just so many options that you can use these cards for. They don't have to just be stuck in a single card pull. They don't have to be stuck overwhelmed in a tarot spread where every tarot card has a coordinating oracle card. It doesn't have to be like that. Use them for how they work for you. There's so many options out there these days that there's something out there. There's something out there that will click. And I think it just takes a bit of slowing down and working with it. So let's look through a couple more of these and we will wrap this up. I think this was fun. I got a lot of thoughts out. I hope that you enjoyed my ponderings here. We saw a good range of oracle decks. Of course, there's many more styles. There are affirmation decks, creative cards, prompts, poetry, you name it, there's something out there. These are just what I enjoy and what works for me. And I hope that this video has inspired you to pull out an old oracle deck or to bring in an oracle deck and try it in your practice. Maybe look at your oracle decks in a new light. Maybe try them in a new way. And let me know how it goes. Let me know your thoughts as well on the whole oracle card debacle. It's not really, but I am just always stumped that oracle cards aren't nearly as popular as tarot cards. You know, it's just like they're like the misfit, and I really don't see them that way. I see them as an equal, but they're different. And I just find them still just as thrilling and fascinating as I do tarot decks, if not more, for the reasons that I stated, that they don't fit into a structured system, that you can really take things where you want with them. especially if you get something like a wild card like these decks. I mean, that just adds a layer of fun and curiosity. And perhaps at the end of the day, that's just my personal perspective and ethos on all of this and just the way I exist. But enough of me, enough of this. Do let me know your thoughts down below. I would love to chat Oracle with you in the comments because I know everyone's got an opinion and perspective on this, so let's definitely hear it. Until then, and until next time, I will catch you on the next video. Bye.